This is Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.
I shuddered thinking how the world could be so cruel, and my voice to those who can't. It's time we care, it's time we stand. It starts with a voice.
Welcome back to the Special Chronicles show. This is episode 459. My name is Daniel. I'm the founder of Special Chronicles and a Southern Tribal International Global Messenger with Special Olympics. SpecialChronicles.com is where you can go to find links to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, subscribe to our podcast and our newsletter. Our guest this week on the Special Chronicles show is a returning guest, John Murray, who is an Emmy-winning television producer from the new Peacock original series Born for Business. And a few years ago, John was a previous guest on this podcast about the Emmy-winning docuseries Born This Way and the documentary Deaf Out Loud. And now he graciously agreed to return as a guest on this podcast for an engaging conversation about his new television series Born for Business that is streaming now for free on Peacock. And so please put your virtual hands together as we welcome John. Welcome, John. Welcome back.
Happy to be here.
And I forgot when the last time that you were on the program, but and so our listeners can go back on specialchronicles.com and just do a search for either Born This Way or Deaf Out Loud and find those previous episodes. But for any new listeners, and I had an opportunity to screen just a few episodes. I haven't had a chance to finish all the episodes of your new series, Born for Business, but I had an opportunity to preview a few of those episodes. So for any new listeners, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us your connection with our disability community and your previous groundbreaking. I believe your previous television series has been groundbreaking, but featuring our disability community.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to be here, Daniel. I think from the start of our company, Murray, we were always interested in telling stories of communities that have been marginalized, communities that have not been featured regularly or on film or television. And so obviously Born This Way was an example of that. The cast members all having Down syndrome, all at that unique point in their lives where they had been raised to be independent, and they were taking their final steps towards independence. It was a very relatable story and an important story, particularly for people in the Down syndrome community, because they really were the first generation that were raised to be independent. And it was relatable to anyone who has a child who's getting to that age where they're stepping out and making their own decisions. We've always been interested in telling these kinds of stories. And, we had a documentary called the Musical, which again, told the stories of families with children on the autism spectrum and how that affected the family. And we were actually able to revisit that last year with Autism, the sequel. Which 10 years later sort of showed some of those kids now in college and what was going on in their lives, how they had continued to grow and make choices in life to be full members of their communities. So this is an area that's always interested me.
Awesome. Let's now, we're going to go ahead and take a short sponsor break, and when we come back, we'll get into a little bit about the backstory of how you started this new series, Born for Business, and how it came to be streaming on Peacock. And filming during the pandemic as well. I'm sure we'll touch a little bit on that. So our conversation with our guest is John Moe from the show Born for Business on Peacock. Our conversation continues after the break. We're going to take a quick break from our conversation today to learn how you can become a Special Chronicles supporter so we can continue to produce this podcast. Support for Special Chronicles comes from listeners like you. As an independent public media podcast, Special Chronicles will always be there for you. Now we're asking you to be there for us. As a nonprofit independent media organization, we can only make programs like Special Chronicles with listener support. Our programs provide weekly, candid, honest, and inspiring conversations about the people with disabilities community that creates awareness, support, and advocacy within each week's episode. Listeners tell us our shows are an enjoyable and necessary podcast for the intellectual and developmental disability community and everyone else who is able to listen to stories about life from a different angle. Please, if you and your family love our weekly podcast, make a one-time, monthly, or annual gift of thanks today. Support this podcast at specialchronicles.com/give. That's specialchronicles.com/give. And now, back to the show to continue the conversation today. And back to the show. We're back. This is Daniel, founder of Special Chronicles, and our guest is Jonathan Moe from the show Born for Business. And so now, John, let's get into this new series and tell us a little bit about the backstory of how Born for Business came to be when you started filming it, and a little bit about how you came to produce this new series.
Sure. Well, it's actually one of the most unusual stories I have of how a television show came to be. I was a panelist at Real Screen, which is a TV convention, and I was talking about Born This Way and about the show and about the impact it was having. And after the panel, a woman came up to me and introduced herself and said she worked for Shopify, which is a Canadian company that actually handles sort of the back process for entrepreneurs, online process for ordering and delivery of materials. And she was a huge fan of not only Born This Way, but also going back to the real world. Mm-hmm. And she started talking to me about entrepreneurship in the disability community and how it is really, for some people who are shut out of regular jobs because of their disability, entrepreneurship can be an answer. And we just started talking about it. And, a year later, we were shooting Born for Business. Mm-hmm. And, Shopify, her company, was the studio for this. They put up the money. And we then began the process of casting and looking for individuals who, from a variety of backgrounds, geographically different, and with different disabilities, who were tackling entrepreneurship.
Awesome. And that's a good transition. And that I wanted to maybe have you talk a little bit about the casting and the types of disabilities that, how did you find the full, I don't have the notes in front of me from when I was watching the series, but tell us a little bit about who was featured and how you came to cast the full entrepreneurs with disabilities to profile on the series, and then also how you decided which disabilities that you decided to focus, because I believe there was only one person with Down syndrome. Unlike Born This Way, you focused on like one type of disability, but it was nice to see kind of a wide range of different types, and some visual disabilities, but then also you had featured some invisible disabilities as well. So it's kind of good to have a good mix. So how did you come to cast these, and these individuals, and how did you decide which disabilities to focus on?
Yeah, well, when we went into the casting, we decided that we wanted to feature a variety of disabilities because people of all kinds of disabilities are using entrepreneurship to secure their economic future. So our casting group, which are pretty amazing, hold on.
No,
Our casting group, which is pretty amazing, began searching for people. And they basically put the word out. They let different organizations know that represent different kinds of people with disabilities. And they just started working the phones and doing Zoom interviews. And ultimately, we found 4 people that we thought were a nice cross section. Kiana Allen, she's a fashionista and she has lupus. And, lupus is a chronic disease. It's mostly manageable, but it has flare-ups. And when it has flare-ups, that can cause problems for you when you work for a company maybe who is not sympathetic to that and just doesn't understand why you need to be at home for a week or two to recover. And Kiana has a plus-size brand of clothing and a boutique in Chicago, and she was expanding her business into other elements that sort of focus on the plus-size woman. Colette DeVito is the young woman on the cast. She has Down syndrome, and she has a bakery business, and she makes cookies, Coletti's cookies. And she also is interesting because she's taken it part of her mission to hire people with disabilities to work for her, which I think is interesting. Yeah. And then there's Chris Tribes, who's a single dad and is in the concert business. Now he has a spinal muscular atrophy, which means that he gets around mostly in a wheelchair, and he's raising a daughter. He's mostly a single dad, and he needs to have a strong economic future to support his daughter, and he's in the concert promotion business. And then Lexi Zangi is a millennial entrepreneur, and she has anxiety, and that anxiety has sometimes kept her at home and made it hard for her to leave her house. And she started with an online fashion business, and now she's expanding that to a brick and mortar store. And part of her thing is that, if she has a reason to leave the house, if she has a purpose, and if she knows what she's doing when she's at that store, I think that helps her with her anxiety. So all 4 of these people are unique. Some, as you said, some of their disabilities are invisible, and some are more apparent.
Awesome. Well, kind of going on from you said that somebody from Shopify had approached you about creating this series, and can you share a little bit more about why you wanted to produce a series? Because I'm sure there's probably a lot of people that might try to approach you or anybody at your company to produce a TV show, but what intrigued you, and what intrigued you to want to produce this series, Born for Business, now kind of coming off of Born This Way?
Yeah, well, part of getting involved with Born This Way sort of really introduced me to the disability community, and I got involved with an organization called Respectability. It's a national organization that really advocates for people with disabilities in Washington at state capitals, and has been doing a lot of work in Hollywood to increase representation of people with disabilities, both in front of and behind the camera. And I know through my work with them that there is this real interesting push to try and get people with disabilities to start their own businesses. Previously the government has mostly been trying to connect people with disabilities with jobs that are existing, like, oh, we can, get you in to work at McDonald's or work at the grocery store, or, these things, but they haven't been that helpful to people who want to start their own businesses. So we thought this program would be really an example of how this can happen, and so that's why it was interesting to me, because the show could not only be good television, but it could help us do some breakthroughs in terms of helping people with disabilities move into entrepreneurship.
Awesome. Well, we're going to go and take another short break, because if it wasn't for our supporters and partners, then we wouldn't be able to be behind the microphone speaking today. When we come back, we'll get into how this came to be streaming on Peacock, and a little bit about the process of filming during COVID and during the pandemic, because I'm sure there was probably some challenges there. So we'll get into all that. Our guest is Jonathan Murray, and our conversation about his new series, Bone for Business, continues after the break right here on specialchronicles.com. And hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break from our conversation today to hear a message from our partner. Support for Special Chronicles comes from ComEd. Special Chronicles is proud to partner with the ComEd Energy Force Ambassador Program. The Energy Force is the country's first energy efficiency education program designed for and taught by people with disabilities. ComEd is powering lives, and really is powering us here at Special Chronicles to keep the lights on and our technology is powered on. As ComEd powers the lives of us, they're literally giving a voice to people with special needs. We thank ComEd for the generous support of our mission at Special Chronicles. Learn more at specialchronicles.com/ComEd. That's specialchronicles.com/ComEd. And now we return to our conversation. This episode continues right now. And we're back. Our guest is Jonathan Murray from the new series Bone for Business, and let's now get into because the series Bone This Way was airing on the A&E network. So maybe now, kind of as we get into having you share a little bit about how Peacock came to be the platform, the distribution platform for streaming this new series. How can you share with us about how Peacock came to stream this? And I believe there was also a Canadian network as well. But what was that process like? And then how is that different from going from a cable TV network to streaming, which of course people can watch it on the TVs, but like I was I ended up was just streaming it on my iPad. I could have gone to the TV, but share with us a little bit about how Peacock came to be and the difference from going from the A&E network to Peacock.
Yeah, the big difference is that our studio in this case was Shopify. So they were funding the program. So it was interesting. We weren't working with a network or a streamer as we made this show. We just worked with Shopify. And so we sort of had unfettered sort of ability to make the show we wanted to make. And so we made the episodes. And then when they were all done, edited, everything was done, we then went out to the streamers, to the various streamers, to the networks, and showed them what we had. And ultimately, Peacock made us the best offer. And they seemed to be really excited about the show and had just such passion for it that we decided to take it to Peacock. We also liked that, people could see the show on Peacock, with commercials. So sometimes, some of the challenges with Born This Way were that there were people who couldn't necessarily afford to, pay for cable TV. So it was hard for them to see the show. So it's nice with Peacock that you can see the show because they'll just, they have two feeds, one sort of with commercials and one without. If you pay the extra, you don't have the commercials, but if you don't, then you can still see the show. Yeah. So we were excited about everybody being able to see the show on Peacock. And so it's been great.
Awesome.
And it's also sort of fun that, you can binge it.
Yeah.
And we actually, when we were making the show, we really tried to design it for a streamer. We were hoping we would end up at a streamer. And so the episodes tend to end in a way each episode that makes you want to like watch the next
Yeah.
episode.
Well, and I was just going to kind of comment on that. I found when watching, it really was that kind of binge. I don't think bingeable is the word, but that
It's good.
yeah, it was that bingeable, that type of series that makes you want to kind of follow the full stories. And so talk us about, and I forgot if you mentioned, when did you start filming this series, and talk to us about filming during, well, still, as we all know, we're still in the pandemic with COVID and wearing masks and social distancing and all the safety precautions that go along with COVID. But tell us about filming during the filming during the pandemic. I know you highlighted this. I believe it was in episode 3. I want to say. I could be off on that episode number, but tell us about filming, and you did touch on it in the series. So, kind of, what was that process like?
Yeah, well, we started filming this before sort of America shut down.
Yeah.
So we were filming for 3 or 4 weeks before the shutdown, and you know, with unscripted television, you really just always, the best solution I find is just to be totally honest with your viewers. So we decided to sort of cover the fact that we were going to have to shut down. We were going to have to stop filming until everybody figured out sort of how this virus is spread, and it also affected our the 4 people's businesses in different ways. So we sort of shut down. We gave them cameras to ask them to keep filming some things that were happening. You know, there was a lot going on. There was the Black Lives Matter protests happening. There was COVID. And so a lot of that we caught with their own cameras. And then once we understood how the virus was transmitted, we could send our crews and producers back out to safely continue to shoot. And so that's sort of what we did. So it became very much a part of our story. And, you know, that's what, you know, entrepreneurs, business people, you know, a pandemic is something that affects your business. And so it was interesting to see how these 4 individuals dealt with the pandemic. And it was interesting. Some, like Kiana, she sailed through it in terms of her online business just blew up. Lexi, again, had an online business, so that helped. Whereas Chris, who is a concert promotion business, pretty much came to a screeching halt. And Colette, her cookie business, she started making cookies for first responders to be part of, you know, helping support those people who are out there supporting all of us. So yeah, so it was interesting. It was I hadn't really dealt with something like that quite before. Maybe when 9/11 happened, I was filming Real World Chicago, and we sort of, you know, ended up you know, stopping for a moment, but then realizing what was going on. We had to put a TV in the loft for the cast so they could see what was going on out in the world. Yeah,
awesome. So before we get into some final thoughts and a question that I always conclude these conversations with, wanted to briefly ask you about how is in addition, as I should say, in addition to our listeners, hopefully I'll put links to where people can go watch it on Peacock. But I believe if people search for Bone for Business on Peacock, they can find it, right? Is there also, if people wanted to shop at these businesses, all of them using Shopify, or how can our listeners support these businesses?
Sure. They don't all use Shopify, and I think that's pretty cool that Shopify wasn't like, you got to use Shopify to be on this show. But I think if you just Google the name of the business, and the business names are, right in the show, so you can, Always Reason, for instance, is Lexi's business. So you can just Google the names of the businesses, and that'll get you to how you can shop at them.
Awesome.
And then the other thing I was going to say is also, if you're interested in becoming an entrepreneur yourself, you can go to respectability.org, and they have on there a webinar on how you can become an entrepreneur, and specifically helping. It's geared at helping people with disabilities take that path to entrepreneurship. There's a lot of really good information there.
Awesome. So yeah, I'll definitely put a link to respectability.org. So I'm sure a lot of people will be interested in wanting to start their own business, because especially I know, I mean, I'm been lucky enough to be one of 4 special Olympics athletes that are employed by United Airlines, but I know that not everybody gets that opportunity. So seeing these individuals with disabilities all able to kind of go beyond just a company and really work for themselves. We're going to go ahead and take another short break. When we come back, we'll get into some final thoughts as we close out our time together. I think it'll probably be a little bit shorter of a conversation than when you've been on the show in the past. But it's nice to kind of make these podcasts a little bit shorter than in. So our guest is Jonathan Murray. Will be continuing our conversation on his new show for business when the podcast continues after the break. Hey, friends, podcast listener friends. I'd like to take a brief moment to let you know about how awesome StreamYard is. StreamYard is the easiest way to create professional live streams. StreamYard is a live streaming studio in your browser. Interview guests, share your screen, and much more. Stream directly to Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and other platforms. Sign up for StreamYard and get $10 in credit with our referral link at specialchronicles.com/StreamYard. That's specialchronicles.com/StreamYard. You see the link right below on the screen here, and also will be in the show notes in the description below. But all of us at Special Chronicles, we love StreamYard. I've got a coffee mug I'm drinking coffee out of. Got a t-shirt on. I've got a sweatshirt. This StreamYard Puddles plush duck, Puddles the duck, here in the studio, and just really love it. Makes really love StreamYard. It makes it easy to connect with guests. Just send guests the link to join StreamYard, and easily have a professional logo and banners and graphics, and it just makes it easy to pre-record, to live stream on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Really love StreamYard. It's helped to make the audio podcasts and the video versions of the audio podcasts that I've been doing for the past 13 years. It's helped to make the video versions up to the next level, to a more professional level, while also making it easy to live stream. So all of us at Special Chronicles love StreamYard. Once again, if you want to sign up with StreamYard, specialchronicles.com/StreamYard. That's specialchronicles.com/StreamYard to sign up and get $10 in credit with our referral link. I hope you all will sign up for StreamYard, and happy live streaming. And until then, sign up for StreamYard and get $10 in credit with our referral link at specialchronicles.com/StreamYard. That's specialchronicles.com/StreamYard. And now back to the show. Ooh, I think we're back. Oh, there we go. We're back. I guess this is Jonathan Murray from the new show Born for Business on Peacock. As we come to a close with a few final thoughts, John, I would like to have you share with us a little bit about what you hope viewers will learn from watching this new series. Are there any lessons that you hope viewers will learn?
Well, I hope that viewers always learn that people with disabilities are an important part of our larger family, part of our community, and we should provide accommodations and the means by which they can fully participate. And particularly, I think you are seeing in Born for Business that these four individuals are fully participating, and they're earning their own living. In fact, they're employing other people. It's possible, and I hope that people walk away from this show with really a better understanding of that. But then also people who have disabilities know that this is an option for them too.
Awesome. Well, do you have plans for? I kind of two kind of questions here. Is one is, do you have plans for most seasons in the future? And then a kind of a follow-up question to that is kind of going along with this theme of Born This Way to Born for Business. Do you have plans for any other series for kind of Born Full or Born This, kind of in that kind of disability theme?
Yeah, I would love to do another series sort of in this world. And there are some things that are running around in my head right now, nothing I can really specifically talk about yet.
Yeah.
And as for another season of Born for Business, we'd love to do that. I guess it ultimately will depend on how many people are streaming it and whether Peacock decides that enough are streaming it that it makes sense for us to do another season.
Awesome.
But it's just one season. I'm very happy with what we made, and I think it's a great series.
Awesome. Are you able to kind of just like how A&E was able to track the viewers? Are you able to? Because I know like with the podcast at Special Chronicles, we're able to track the downloads and the viewers. Is Peacock also able to kind of let you know how many people are watching?
Yeah, they're not quite as it's just the streamers tend to keep a lot of that close to the vest. They're not quite as open sharing it. So we don't know that much about how it's doing. We just know anecdotally that, there are people out there who are watching it and enjoying it.
Awesome. And is it kind of, if our listeners kind of go back to, I think the first time that you were on the show and you talked about creating the show Born This Way and kind of how that title Born This Way came to be, but maybe kind of briefly for any new listeners who might not have heard that first time that you were on this podcast, we remind our listeners briefly kind of how the show how the title Born This Way came to be, and then kind of go into how you came up with the kind of along this kind of same word of this bone kind of how the title Born for Business.
Yeah,
I think we're still on.
You were frozen for a second there. We looked at a lot of titles for Born This Way. We talked about Born This Way as a title. Obviously, Lady Gaga had a song called Born This Way. And we went back and forth and tried out a lot of different titles. And ultimately, we went back to that because that title really expressed sort of the spirit of the show and the fact that these cast members were fully embracing themselves and who they were. They were defining their lives for themselves. So we just love that title. And when Born for Business came along, I think we settled on that title almost immediately. I don't even think we looked at other titles. We just said, oh my God, that's perfect, because these people are born to be entrepreneurs. They're born for business.
Awesome. Well, before we get to that final question, share with all listeners how they can watch Born for Business, and as well as any plugs on how they can connect with your company as well.
Yeah. You can watch Born for Business on Peacock. I hope you watch it. If you like it, please use your social media to tell other people about it. We need as many viewers as possible if we're ever going to get a second season, if that's even possible. And then you can certainly keep up with our company. We're Bunim. It's actually BUNIM.
Oh.
You got a little extra H in there. BunimMurray.com. That's the website, and you can also follow us on Instagram. Yeah, you can keep up with what we're up to.
Awesome. I'm glad I corrected that spelling, so that way when I go and get the podcast ready to be released, I can put the correct link in the show notes on Special Chronicles this episode. And before we get to the final question, any final thoughts on your overall time here today on the Special Chronicles show that you want to share with our listeners?
No, Daniel, I always enjoy talking with you. I think you just get better with each of these. Is it the proper word? Podcast? What is the proper weapon? What are they?
Podcasts.
Yes. You just get better with each one. So congratulations on your program. I always enjoy it.
Thank you. Yeah, I know. I just got back. I was camping with my mom last night, and she was saying the same thing that you just said. That, and it seems like you keep. And I'm sure you feel the same way about each show that you and your company produce. I'm sure you guys get better with each show.
Yeah, experience helps. You can learn from your mistakes and keep growing.
Awesome. So I've got a quick bumper before we get to that final question. I'll conclude as we wrap up our conversation with Jonathan Murray. So that final question.
We're not just athletes.
We are the ambassadors of an uprising.
Peaceful protesters.
In a rebellion against anyone
who has a fear of difference.
Difference.
Our demands are
Equality.
Dignity.
and the recognition of our
Shared humanity. We will not stop or accept anything less.
Today, our world is
more divided than ever.
And coming together has never been more urgent.
The revolution.
is inclusion.
Find out more at jointherevolution.org.
As you can probably tell from that bumper, I always conclude these podcasts with, and I'll do the same with you, and asking you about what does inclusion mean to you?
Well, to me, inclusion means, as a business owner, stepping out of sort of the way you always did things. I think there's a natural thing in the television business when we're out making a show and we're up against the clock that we want to surround ourselves with people that we've worked with before. And I think that we all realize now that we can't do that because then we don't let other kinds of people into the process. So we need to make an effort each time to reach out beyond our normal group of people that we work with to see who else is out there, who might bring a different life experience to making that television show. And I think it'll be a better television show if we have all kinds of life experiences on the creative side and on the production side of that process.
Awesome. Well, that's a great way to conclude a conversation. It's been a joy having you on, and I'm looking forward to staying in touch.
Great, Daniel. Always a pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on your show.
Awesome. Thanks. And until then, remember, choose to include. We'll see you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Special Chronicles Shows podcast. Visit SpecialChronicles.com to follow Special Chronicles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube, and don't forget to hit the bell to be notified of new episodes. Also, subscribe to our newsletter mailing list to sign up for updates and get exclusive content delivered to your inbox. Remember to do what you do with these podcasts. Subscribe or follow and rate and review Special Chronicles on Apple Podcasts, the iHeartRadio app, or wherever you get your podcasts. Finally, please share this episode and all of our podcasts with your friends and family. Help us grow our audience and reach 5,000 downloads of our audio podcasts and over 14,000 average monthly listeners. Have a great week, and we'll see you back here next week with exciting new guests. See you next week.
Special Chronicles, giving respect and a voice to people with special needs.